Act 1, Scene 7, all the pieces are in place. Duncan is there in Inverness. We have the prophecy from the witches saying Macbeth will be king. All that is required at this point is the will, the decision, the active agency of Macbeth to kill Duncan to bring about prophecy. And this is where he has been a little squishy so far. We have Lady Macbeth swearing that she is going to push him through to this. We have Lady Macbeth welcoming Duncan in and putting on the false face that you are safe, you are welcome, we are all here, we love you, our dear monarch. And Macbeth has been sort of in the shadows since then. But Act 7 opens with a very busy stage, lots of activity, lots of noise. We're told that hautboys, which are musical instruments like oboes, musicians practicing, torches, lots of bustle, servants running around with dishes, servants running around cleaning things up. It is a flurry of activity because the king is in residence at the castle at that moment. And with all of this activity on stage, and you got to imagine lots and lots of busyness, not unlike the busyness of a war and a battlefield. Here we are in the domestic sphere, an equal kind of busyness. Macbeth wanders on, and he's alone. Essentially, he starts with this long soliloquy. And a soliloquy is generally a character thinking to themselves, being very alone, soliloquy. And so you get this weird dynamic where it can be staged a number of different ways, of course. You can have the flurry and then they all disappear and then it's just Macbeth sitting there. Or you can have him on stage in mid the crowd, but still being alone, which is an interesting dynamic and points out the essential loneliness and anti-sociability is one term you could use, the introvertedness of this character, at least at this moment. And he wanders on stage, consumed in his own thoughts, and starts thinking out loud to himself. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence, and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the be-all and end-all. But here upon this bank and shoal of time we'd jump the life to come. But in these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commands the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. And pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or a heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. And then Lady Macbeth enters. A couple things really quick on that. Beginning, if it were done that when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. He wants to skip over all of the fuss, all the muss, and get to the result. He wants to overleap. You see it in a couple of instances throughout this speech, and obviously a couple instances throughout this play. He wants to overleap the now and get to the future. He is also seeking to deny the consequences. Like, yeah, I shouldn't be held responsible for killing the king, but now I am the king, so let's just put the past behind us and move on. Not realistic. Certainly not realistic for a leader, for a monarch. The constant frustration he feels in, I just want the crown, the constant frustration of having to go through and actively bring about the status of being king instead of just being it. That wishful thinking is not what we would expect of a leader. He has command capacity. He has heroic qualities that he has demonstrated on the battlefield, but this faculty of being able to look realistically at the responsibilities of leadership, of governance, that is failing him. But you go down through this speech and you see him trying to rationalize constantly, well, how can I get out? How am I not going to be responsible? How can I avoid responsibility? There is an attempt by Macbeth, and he's not necessarily the smartest Shakespearean character we have out there. He's trying to piece together a rationale, and yet he is very, very concerned about the consequences of his actions. He's always bearing down and trying to rationalize this, trying to figure it out in a way that will just make all the problems go away. But it is the nature of leadership, you could say, that new problems always arise. And here, perhaps this is an instance of Shakespeare giving general advice to leaders all over. When he says, he's here, Duncan, he's here in double trust, first as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. That sense of doubling is back again. That sense that he is two different persons here. He is the king's subject. At the same time, he is also, in this capacity, a host. And this is a more ancient role, quite frankly, going back to the Greeks. We saw this in Homer. The idea that a host has a certain responsibility for his guests, and that graciousness of hosting should be respected. And to betray that is a violation of the social order. A social order that is, in this one respect, some ways more ancient even than that of a subject to a monarch. So you can see him piling on the sense of, oh yeah, I'm not just betraying my king, I'm betraying my guest. So he's almost striking on these notions, these problems in real time as he's weighing it over in his own head. The rationale becomes even more dire, I would say, when he starts dwelling on the political consequences, saying, Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels. And he understands that everybody likes Duncan. Duncan's a popular king. And to kill Duncan is going to raise some questions. Who would want to kill Duncan? Well, let's look around. People will be upset to lose him. A bad king? People are not so upset to lose a bad king. It's like, all right, why ask questions? He's gone, patooey, that's it. But with Duncan, everybody likes him. This is going to bring more heat to the questioning, and Macbeth is smart enough, understands politics enough to understand this and give him just a little bit more pause. And you can see him in this reeling back his rationale, reeling back his assertion that, okay, I'm gonna have to do it. He is retreating on his vow in this in the act of this speech. The image that he plays with here, then after considering that, which is a fairly clear cut piece of stretch of lines, is the somewhat famous and complicated image that he hits in the lines. And pity, like a naked newborn babe striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. Very complicated, very rich imagery there, and you can imagine that the groundlings wandering around, having been standing for a little while now, and perhaps like not catching every line. Huh? What? You can argue that a number of different ways. What is interesting about these lines was struck on by the American critic Clint Brooks, who dwells on the notion of these lines as an example of paradox, because he points out that the images are somewhat mixed. The naked newborn babe is a symbol of some weakness, and yet he is striding before the blast. It becomes a symbol of strength. There is weakness and strength, and that controversy, that conflict between those two understandings of the image, is something that Macbeth stumbles on as he is thinking out loud, but doesn't necessarily resolve. Brooks says, "Is pity like the human and helpless babe, or powerful as the angel that rides the winds? It is both. It is strong because of its very weakness. The paradox is inherent in the situation itself, and it is the paradox that will destroy the over-brittle rationalism on which Macbeth founds his career." You can see him trying to think these through, and he just strikes on these images almost out of his subconscious. And these convoluted understandings of the image, these convoluted interpretations of the images, feed the general theme of the general theme of Macbeth's problem here, where the reading of reality is so fraught. And Macbeth's core problem in this is that he cannot see a connection or a collateral function of weakness and strength simultaneously. The issue that he seems to be striking on is, well, okay, in order to be strong, I have to act, which means to kill the king. But if I didn't act, would that be a sign of weakness? Or is that weakness a kind of strength because I am waiting my turn to be king? I know I'm going to be king, but maybe I don't see how that can come to be. I don't necessarily want to wait for that. Maybe the witches were wrong. I have to take action. And that inability to resolve the paradox, quite frankly, to bring these two conflicting ideas to some sort of coherence, parallel though it may be, is in one drastic way, I would say, his Achilles heel in this, his fatal flaw, his inability of imagination, as some critics put it, to knit all of these problems together and accept that, well, sometimes weakness is strength, sometimes passivity is being active of a kind, and that and that ability to transcend the limits of rationalism, the limits of logic, the limits of humanist thought by understanding a larger context of infinity with around that, let's say, that is what he keeps crashing into, because he wants to overleap all of these questions. He wants to overleap all of these problems, but he's always crashing into them. And then, of course, at the very end, you get that little meta joke, sort of, where he is engaging in yet another metaphor, but only vaulting ambition, which overleaps itself and falls on the other, ... Enter Lady Macbeth. So, as he is talking about overleaping something, the reality comes in and interrupts him. He is, at this point, he seems to be striking on a decision that he's not necessarily going to go through with it, or at least edging up to that. But then, of course, here comes Lady Macbeth, who will put the steel in his spine and drive him to act as he has basically said he would. So she is that interruption. And of course, on the meta level, leaping into the unknown, the future, and it gets broken off. He doesn't really know the future. He doesn't really know what is coming down the pike. Here he starts off a sentence and it gets interrupted, it gets cut off. And that is kind of the way life works. But of course, he comes right back from that, and his question leading to her, he's asking questions, is now a little bit more neutral. How now? What news? Is he asking at this point for any new developments that I can get out of this with? Or is it, okay, anything I need to know before I go ahead with this? Two clear choices for an actor to make there, for a director to design. But you can see the fraught moment at play here. And then you have another great dialogue between these two characters, where Lady Macbeth has some of her best lines, has some of her most famous lines, some of her most horrifying lines in many ways, but also some of the clearest articulations of the character of ambition and focus and determination that her character personifies, and she is trying to instill in her husband. And it's just a fun scene. It's not that long. They are roughly evenly matched in lines. And you get this great opportunity where these two titanic characters, whom we know pretty well at this point, are now debating the prime matter of the play. So you are on the edge of your seat throughout it, and it is just fun. Lady Macbeth: he has almost supped. Why have you left the chamber? Little suspicious. Little, what are you doing? Macbeth: hath he asked for me? Not answering the question from her, but again, sort of drilling down for some information that maybe he can use to complete a thought that is knocking on his door, so to speak. Lady Macbeth: know you not he has? Been away for a while, you don't even realize he has asked for you. This is you should be watching him. There is a leading question. Again, this sense of this married couple, they have a history, they can talk to one another, and they are expressing so much more than these simple lines on the script. Macbeth says, we will proceed no further in this business. He hath honored me of late, and I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. He's wearing his big boy pants now. He's laying down the law, saying, no, I've made up my mind, no. that will not be the end of it. One of the curious items of this scene that I find curious, that is not so apparent in the performance, but is more apparent on the page, is the number of line breaks between them, where instead of a full line for one character followed by a full line for the other character, you see repeated instances in this little stretch where he will start a line that then she will finish, metrically at least, on the page, and you can see them batting back and forth. So he has thrown down a gauntlet, so to speak, in this, and now she will counter. Lady, oh, I love this. Lady Macbeth. Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since, and wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time such I account thy love. Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemed the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cat in the adage? Little bullying, little hectoring, little shrewish would be a more sexist, loaded term, but let's face it, a little accurate. She is attacking his manhood here. She is emasculating him. But he fights back. Macbeth, prithee, peace! I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none. Interesting redefinition of what manliness is, of what masculinity is. And notice how that's suddenly what they're talking about. He feels attacked by his wife on this term of masculinity, and he is redefining it for her. Say, no, I'm staying within the bounds of decency, which is a more masculine definition of what you're advocating, which is a kind of bestiality, not humanist masculinity, where it is in keeping with Judeo-Christian ethics or something like that. Lady Macbeth, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? When you durst do it, then you were a man, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more than man. Nor time nor place did then adhere, and yet you would make both. They have made themselves, and that their fitness now does unmake you. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. Whoa, she's getting really personal here. She's still attacking the basic concept of his masculinity. What are you? You're going back on your word to me? What happened to everything you said to me? The vows between them are suddenly being questioned in distinction from the vows he makes to, let's say, the universal order, the moral order. Which is priority here? And she is placing the priority on their intimate connection. And so she goes even more intimate. And we get that little peek into their life, which is so crucial because so much is unspoken between them. Here we get, I have given suck and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. Lady Macbeth has been a mother. They don't have children. There are no children in this play. Not their children. There are no mentions of children around. So the conclusion to draw there is that they had a child and it died. And here she's saying that if she had known what Macbeth was going to do, she would have killed the child out of outrage or something like that. And you have to figure that even in a very even in that time when children died in childhood all the time because of inadequate medical care or whatever, the pain would still be quite acute, especially if that is the only child they have, and that's the only evidence we have that there ever was a child. So if that one child died and now she is saying that, well, I would have killed it myself, that's not a casual remark. That is not just a flippant remark. That is deeply personal. And you can see underneath that more texture, more nuance, more undercurrents of other fights or discussions they may have had where they are litigating their relationship publicly in a way here, because there might still be other people rushing around, but they're having this very intimate conversation. How do you do that? Does that reflect on her character as being so divorced from humanity? So separated from compassion? If not for the child itself, let's say, but just that she would go there with him. I think that says so much about this relationship, this very complicated relationship. And the idea that she would equate that death, the loss of the child, to this betrayal that she feels from Macbeth. Now, maybe they have, as he has called it, a partnership where they are equal elements in this world, and that is admirable in its way. But it is a misplacement, perhaps, of loyalties. Is the greater loyalty to the king and the notion of civilization itself, which is predicated on thou shalt not kill, let's say? Or is the greater priority your fealty to your spouse, your partner, your one other person, to humanity itself? Are you more loyal to human bonds, human forged bonds, than to the universal order designed by God? There's so much going on here. But you can see that kink, where Macbeth suddenly questions. And if we should fail, notice how he's shifted a little here. He's feeling cornered. She has been questioning his manhood. Perhaps he has been bullied effectively. She does know him very well and knows how to push his buttons. But if it should fail, we're shifting back into the subjunctive mood here. We are shifting back into him sliding into that willingness to do that. And Lady Macbeth, always confident, we fail, notably have done to this. Lady Macbeth's line is about half the line, 1/3 the line. If we should fail, metrically, Macbeth's line continues that line, and then we fail continues that line. So that line break is suddenly all a single line interwoven between them. So you can see on a poetic, on a strictly graphological, if that's a word, level, the two of them are knitting together once again. He is pulled back and they have been separated, but now she is encompassing him literally on the page. His line is couched between her two chunks of that single line. We fail, but screw your courage to the sticking place. A great line, famous line. Remember that if you ever have to do a locker room halftime talk. Screw your courage to the sticking place, and will not fail when Duncan is asleep. Whereto the rather shall this day's hard journey soundly invite him. His two chamberlains will I with wine and wassail so convince that memory, the water of the brain, shall be a fume, and the receipt of reason a limbic only. Then, when in swinish sleep their drenched natures lies as in a death, what cannot you and I perform upon the unguarded Duncan? What not put upon his spongy officers, who shall bear the guilt of our great quell? She is going to essentially frame the guards. She is going to basically get them drunk, but notably also the idea that she is going to, with wine and wassail, essentially get them drunk. But also that notion of, and here the characterizations are so important, she is going to give them something to drink that will make them like essentially death. Poison, in a way. And this is this is a drug. And the association of drugs with women leads one to think of witches, quite frankly. That was a characteristic of witches. They associated with drugs and mysterious potions and all of that double bubble boil and trouble stuff that we're going to see soon. And the association there is she is acting like a witch, but she is also in this moment, of course, creating an alibi. She is creating a somewhat facile ruse by which they can escape blame. In another way, you could look at this as her taking care of her husband. Don't worry, honey. You're worried that we're going to get caught and we're going to be killed and our heads are going to be stuck up on the battlement somewhere. Yeah, okay, that would be bad, but it's not going to happen because I'm going to take care of it. Again, she is willing to take an active part here, or at least she says she is. And I think that's an important element within this, that she is looking out for her husband. She's trying to convince him by creating some rationale that he can do this and escape consequences. But she is at the same time, yes, definitely taking care of him. And Macbeth pulling back from her again, no longer ensconced in a line, but delivering a half line to her half line. And remember the line about the baby. He says, "Bring forth men children only, for thy undaunted mettle should compose nothing but males. Will it not be received when we have marked with blood those sleepy two of our own chamber and used their very daggers, that they have done it?" He's going back to the mention of the child. Bring forth men children only. Maybe that child was another boy, a continuation, an heir, a continuation of their line, or is this, well, it doesn't have to be an or, it can also be a little prick on his part, no pun intended, that she cannot have another child for whatever reason. And the mention of that might drain the blood from her face for a moment. So just like she attacked his manhood, and they're still arguing about the definition of manhood here. In essence, she, by bringing forth men children, is almost like she is assuming the masculine role in this relationship. He is willing to go that level of personal, that level of intimate pain between them, just like she was. So they are so well matched. Perhaps he wasn't at the beginning, but now we're seeing him get down and dirty with her, who is the most vibrant opponent he has in this. Killing Duncan is kind of nothing, but opposing his wife is everything. The fact that he would do that now shows that he is ready to kill. He has been reduced to something quite animalistic. Lady Macbeth says, "Who dares receive it other, as we shall make our griefs and clamor roar upon his death?" Our griefs and clamor. We will pretend to be so upset and so surprised that he's been killed. We'll put on a sad face. We'll put on a tragic face. We'll play the part. Again, remember, be like the time. Your face is like a book. Don't be like that. Here, she is saying, let's put on an appearance. And people will interpret from that we are not guilty. And Macbeth's response, "I am settled." He has been argued into the corner here. He has resolved. He's going to do it. "I am settled, and bend up each corporal agent to this terrible feat. Away, and mock the time with fairest show. False face must hide what the false heart doth know." More appearances, more falsity, more art on the surface that needs to be interpreted throughout, and he has been backed into a corner. So now this is the end of Act 1. Everything is in place. The efficiency of this is remarkable. Scene 1, the witches plan an encounter with Macbeth. Scene 2, war creates an opportunity, and Macbeth emerges as a notable killer with some talent for human destruction. Scene 3, the witches prophesize Macbeth's coronation. Scene 4, Macbeth concludes that he has to kill Duncan, who now plans to visit. Scene 5, Lady Macbeth incites Macbeth's murderous ambition. Scene 6, Lady Macbeth welcomes Duncan to Inverness. And now Scene 7, Macbeth agrees to murder Duncan. One thing after the other after the other. Each one of these scenes lays a brick in the foundation that will support everything that moves forward. And it is breathtaking to see the efficiency of the dramaturgy here, the simple laying out of a plot that is relentless in its development, like the relentlessness of fate itself. All of this needs to be understood, that you are building very quickly so that you are hungry for, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? You in the audience want to know the future too. You want to know what's going on. You're starting to feel that lust to know, that curiosity to know what is going to happen. How is it going to work out? Does good really prevail in the end, or can evil come out on top? Or is there some negotiation between those two terms? What will the end show? And all of this, of course, is an analog to death. We're all curious about what comes next. We're all curious about what happens on the other side. And if we could just overleap nature to learn what happens on the other side of death, we understand that. We feel that same curiosity. So Shakespeare is working in this vein that is, on the one hand, very pulpy. It's murder, it's intrigue, it's all of this stuff. But on the other hand, it is universal and existential. He's dealing with the fraught, terrifying condition of humanity not knowing what's going to happen next.